Imagine for a moment that you have the sort of brain that won't let you sleep. It's constantly muttering to you about stuff to make and do, stuff to mash up with other stuff, stuff that isn't quite right.
Sorry, this isn't your brain speaking, it's your stomach.
Stuff and nonsense. If you're a creative person, that's probably not much of a stretch. I certainly suffer from this frequently, and one solution I've found is to write things down. Since the time of Pythagoras, mathematics and music have been close cousins. For the past few years, the musical ideas I've been writing down have been mostly mathematical. Every time I think of an idea from maths that might be used to make music, whether it's an idea of my own, a YouTube video I've watched, or just browsing the OEIS, I've been adding it to Evernote, planning to make an album. Until I got settled into this new home in 2021, I'd found myself unable to make music for some years. I was too stressed. I hated where I was living. The neighbours were noisy, the traffic and air pollution were horrible. Aberdeenshire changed everything. I was finally ready. And so that's where we are now. After decades of dabbling in various genres, playing, touring and recording, trying to become a film composer, yeah, good luck to anybody doing the same, you have my best wishes. I've come full circle. All the way back to my beginnings in 1979 when I saw Gary Newman live at the Bristol Hippodrome. When I was so in love with synths that I thought guitars would become obsolete. Don't worry, I grew up. All the way back to electronica. And these days, oh boy do we have powerful tools at our disposal for making music. Where does one begin? Where indeed? That's what A Maze of Twisted Little Passages is really all about. The impossibly complex labyrinth of life choices we all face, and the difficulty of trying to ignore the regret over the ones we never took. In this video, I'm going to delve into some of the details behind the making of this track, and also talk a little bit about the album as a whole. Stick around if you want the inside scoop. In late 2023, I was playing my Linstrument. The Linstrument is an expressive controller made by Roger Linn, most famous for the Linn drum, the drum machine that bears his name. Playing the Linstrument is especially great for a keyboardist, because it makes you think differently about the music you're playing. The rows are arranged with consistent intervals between each one, like strings. The whole thing is pressure sensitive and very well designed. So I made this track and uploaded it to YouTube. A later version of it made it onto the album under the title Ghost. Over the Christmas break, something fired me up. I couldn't stop making music. By March of 2024, I was ready to get the album mastered, and I also had a number of videos well underway. It was an extraordinary time, full of energy and hope. So now we have THENCE, which, as it turned out, had a theme of travel and exploration. And on the surface, the opening track, A Maze of Twisted Little Passages, was about life choices, but it's also about permutations. Mathematically, a permutation of a set S is defined as a bijection from S to itself. But enough jargon. What it means is you just arrange things in all the different possible orders. If you start with 1, 2 and 3, you'll find that you can do this in 6 possible ways. The number 6 is equal to 1 times 2 times 3. In general, if you have n objects and you write down all the permutations of them, you'll find you have n factorial permutations. For a set of 4, it's 24. For a set of 5, it's 120. As the numbers go up, they get bigger very, very fast. What I wanted to do was use these lists of permutations to make music. By the way, the title of the track comes from a 1970s computer adventure game called Colossal Cave. This game contained a maze where all the rooms appeared to be described the same way, making it very hard to navigate. But in fact, each room had a coded name contained in the description. For example, "You were in a maze of twisted little passages, all different," was not the same room as "You are in a little maze of twisting passages, all different." The permutation of the words, along with the variation between twisty and twisting, encoded the identity of the room, making it easy enough to create a map. So the first thing I had to do was figure out what to do with all the permutations. The most obvious one to experiment with was the set of 3, since it was nice and small. I wrote them all down, then rearranged them into a single line of digits to see how it might work musically. Of course, 6 lots of 3 equals 18, so if I were mapping these to notes I'd have 18 of them. In the end I made them 16th notes, which is why the opening sequence on the track is in 9/8. That's 9 8th notes or 18 16th notes. With me so far? One interesting feature of this sequence is that there are 2 places where a note is repeated. The first is actually across the loop point from the end to the beginning where note 1 is repeated, and the second is a little way in where note 2 is repeated. I decided to use ties on these pairs so that they were simply longer notes, as I thought this gave the music a more interesting texture. These ties are clearly visible in the video widget as arcs around the edge of 2 of the circles. To give this sequence some variety, I did 2 things. First, during the opening, when the sequence was more in the spotlight, I used variations in the chord to make it part of the harmonic rhythm. Second, I also made heavy use of modulation of the sound, which comes from Arturia's Pigment synthesizer. If you watch the video, you'll see the sequence clearly in the scrolling spectrogram, and it's quite cool how this mirrors the MIDI clip I used to generate it. I've included a 1, 2, 3, 4 permutation in the track as well. It's almost impossible to follow by ear since it's percussive and usually low in the mix, but it is there. It's most obvious at the point where it enters. A friend of mine commented that it sounded like a bunch of dwarves with electronic hammers. I'm not sure what Tolkien could have made of that. In the video, it's represented by this 4-segment disc, which reminds me of the 1970s repetition game, Simon. And finally, there's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 permutation. This doesn't start until a couple of minutes into the track, and it kind of forms the backbone of it because it's a long, slow chord sequence. The size of this 5 permutation would have been 120 repeats. Now, I wanted 120 chords because I thought 120 notes wouldn't be long enough for the whole track. So I had a little bit of a think about that, and the calculations suggested it would have been half an hour long. So in the end, what I did was I kept it so that chord 1 was always at the beginning, and I just used the first 24. So it's effectively a 4 permutation, but there's a 5th chord that always starts it, so it's kind of a 5 permutation. You just don't get to hear all of it. I chose chords that would fit with the 3 permutation. For anyone who's interested, that's a C minor arpeggio, and the 5 permutation chords that I chose are as follows. C minor, A flat major 7th, F minor 9th, A half diminished, B flat pentatonic. When you look at this video widget I made, you might think I used some sort of animation software. The truth is a lot more mundane. I have a rather old application on my laptop called Graphic, and I use it for a lot of things, including making Celtic knots, which is very relaxing. For the widget, I used the layer features of Graphic to combine all the required elements into one document, and then rendered them as individual frames, manually setting the brightness level or adding a glow effect to create dozens of different animation frames. I then combined these into 3 separate videos in Final Cut, one for each of the permutation sets. The hard part was making them sync up with the music, but luckily the tempo is a constant 150 BPM, so I just did a whole load of calculations to figure out the number of video frames needed for each animation stage. The rotation of the 1, 2, 3 permutation widget in the opening section follows chord changes, and that was all done in Final Cut Pro, as that was quite easy to do and it saved making too many animation frames. Hear that sound? And that one? And that one? Actually, that one's a bit buried. Here, let me play them for you again in isolation. These aren't just standard everyday synth sounds. They're made of permutations. Yes, that's right. Not only the notes of this track, but the sounds in this track, or some of them, are made from the same mathematical idea that spawned it. Here, let me show you. This wavetable has 3 steps, as you can see. This is the actual shape of the wave in the first sound. As I play it, watch the waveform. It's going through all the permutations. 1, 2, 3, 1, 3, 2, 2, 1, 3, 2, 3, 1, 3, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1. Here's the 4 permutation wave. And the 5. These wavetables were made using my own Java code. The code I've written creates this sort of morphing effect in various different ways using ideas from maths, computer science and just whimsy. Here are some examples. This one's counting in binary. This shows the sequence for various integers when computing the Collatz Conjecture. I don't have time to explain it, but I'll put a link in the description for you. Here's one made out of a fractal formula. A series of sine waves whose frequencies follow a Fibonacci sequence, which I think sounds amazing. Another Fibonacci series, more bell-like. An interpolation based on a Hilbert curve. And a rather weird thing made of moving pieces. At this point I've used hardly any of these sounds, but expect me to remedy that on future work, as I think some of them are pretty unusual. So there you go, there's the first track on the album explained in some detail for those of you who like that sort of thing. Personally, I do like seeing how things are made, and I'm guessing you do too since you made it to the end. So please hit the like button and let me know what you think and ask any questions you might have in the comments below. I'm planning more of these deep dives, so you should also subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next one. And of course it goes without saying that I'm still making music, so there'll be more releases on the way too. Thanks very much for watching, and until next time, look after yourselves.